If you are offering on a property here in my market of Surrey or the Fraser Valley or anywhere in British Columbia, there's a very good chance that you're going to want to do your due diligence on that offer. And here in the province, generally speaking, we refer to our due diligence period as the subject period. And there are very common due diligence conditions or subjects that are entered into most contracts here in the province. So I'm going to explain to you what we call the famous 5 conditions that will be inserted into most contracts, and as well stick around closer to the end of the video if you are buying a condo or a townhouse, any stratified property within the province of British Columbia. You're going to want to stick around because the last 2 are very, very important for you attached buyers. But quickly before we begin, my name's Steve. I sell real estate here in Surrey and the Fraser Valley. And if you would like to stay up to date on the market and learn more about real estate through educational videos like this one, please subscribe to the channel. Also, go ahead and click the like button to get this video out to other people who are trying to navigate the real estate market at the moment, and specifically their purchases and sales that have conditions within them in, what is not a super crazy hot market. You should be able to get most of these conditions inserted into your offer. And of course, if you yourself are looking to purchase a property or you're having difficulty getting out of the market and you think it's time to sell, well, you can book a call with me right now using the link in the description below at a time that works best for you. Now, let's hop into the contract here. The easiest way for me to show you is actually show you an actual contract. So this is the residential contract of purchase and sale that we use here in BC. It's updated regularly, so this may change. This is subject to change, but right now this is the current version as of shooting this video. And as I mentioned, there is what we call a famous 5 conditions. Now, there's all the stuff that you're worried about in your contract that comes up first. Obviously, buyers and sellers' names, prices, deposits. But once you get to page 2 of 10 of the contract in the current form, under terms and conditions, this is where we'll start to see our conditions be written. Now, most of our contract here in BC is like a boilerplate, like if that's the right term even to use, but it's a fillable form. So a lot of the standard contract is just that. It's standardized. We use the same one all the time, so nothing gets missed. But there is sections where you're going to, I guess you would say, customize the offer towards the particular buyer and their needs, or the seller, I guess, too, in any counter offer coming back the other way. So we have what we call the famous 5 conditions. And I'm going to start off with the easiest one, which is financing. Subject to, that's how most conditions are going to start. They're going to start saying this offer is subject to a new first mortgage being made available to the buyer. So when you're looking at a condition, you're likely seeing subject to and then the name of the party, in this case, the buyer. And then at the end of any condition, you're also going to have this condition is for the benefit of, and this happens to be the sole benefit of the buyer, meaning the buyer can remove it. The seller doesn't have to agree to remove this condition from the contract. If it said buyer and seller, we have to put in both the buyer and seller at that point would have to sign off. But this is the right way to do a financing condition. Subject to a new first mortgage being made available to the buyer on or before, you pick the date, right? This is as of July 2024 in the amount of. Now, you should actually be typing in the actual amount here. There's a few reasons for this. Now, there's blanks. Like, for instance, the amount of the mortgage is not going to be the purchase price. So let's say we're buying a $1 million property. We're $200,000 down, which is 20%. So we're looking for an $800,000 mortgage. You want to actually put that number in, but many agents don't. I'll get to that in a bit, but let me just keep going here. With your expected interest rate. So right now, I want to say interest rates are around 5%, and how it's calculated, most here in Canada are actually calculated semi-annually, but it really depends on your particular mortgage. With an amortization period of, most mortgages here are 25 years. A lot of them are 30 years. If we are buying a $1 million property, we're actually probably going to be looking at a 30-year amortization often, because you can do that now. It's no CMHC. So let's say we can go 30 years. And then how long is the term? Well, 5-year money right now is probably around 5%. So let's say on a 5-year term. Then you would actually do that calculation, which I'm not going to do here, and actually put in the estimated amount of what the buyer is expecting to pay. And then in the event they can't secure a mortgage with these type of details or something approximate to this, then they have the right to back out of the contract. Now, this is actually not how most agents will write it, because most agents are, don't get me in trouble, but most agents are lazy. They're actually going to take all of this stuff out. And most agents are going to write a condition this way: subject to a new first mortgage being made available to a buyer on or before such and such a date. This is the lazy person's way to do it. This, to me, I don't want to write an offer this way for my clients, because I want to show the strength in my offer, or why we maybe need a little bit more time for financing. I want to give the seller more details, and I don't just want this to be vague. If I'm receiving an offer on one of my properties and I see this line, which I most often do, I know, for instance, the agent's probably either lazy or not very good, to be perfectly honest with you. Usually it's lazy, but there's also the high likelihood that they have no idea what their buyer's actual financing really is. Most agents are not strong enough, good enough agents to have a conversation with their buyer about their financing. They just write the contract and go figure out your financing. So as soon as I know those terms are typed in, I know I'm dealing with a good professional agent on the other side, and there's a higher likelihood of this deal actually coming together, as opposed to just picking a date. This will actually come blank when you're writing the contract, but just picking a date and saying, hopefully my clients can get it together in that amount of time. I also look for tricks on this financing condition. If you're asking for 14 days conditions, I know for sure your buyer has not gone to the bank and they have no idea what they can actually qualify for. If that's a 5 or 7 day period, now I understand that the buyer's probably in a much better position. So if you're seeing it this way rather than the way that I just deleted, you're probably seeing either a lazy agent or an agent that doesn't have very good communication skills with their buyer, which makes you think twice about accepting their offer. And from an offer presentation point of view, from me being my client or my client being the buyer, I would very much want to show strength here. For instance, if I'm 45% down, I want to be able to show that here. So I'm going to say, hey, we're not looking for as big a mortgage as maybe some of your other buyers. So that's why the financing is written that way, or why I like to do it that way. There is a reason why a lot of agents don't like to put all the details in, and that's because they don't want their buyer held to any specific mortgage terms, which doesn't really happen anyway, but that's could be why they do it. So there would be a specific date written in there. Now let's move on to number 2 of the famous 5, and this is going to be there most of the time: inspection. Now, I love to see in my offers, I actually keep these titles in. Like, I like to see this title here so I know exactly what this clause is entitled or intended to represent. Subject to the buyer obtaining at the buyer's expense, that's the key, the buyer pays for their own inspection, an inspection report, and the buyer being satisfied on or before, again, such and such a date. Now, usually this date and this date are likely going to be the same date. They could be different. You could want to secure your financing first, remove that condition, then do your inspection later on. It's possible, but generally speaking, you're going to see all of these dates be the same date, with the results of being satisfied, with the results of the inspection report. So they have to be happy with whatever they see. Now, quite often you will see a number also inserted into this clause, like, we're going to be happy with the inspection report as long as there's not more than $2,000 worth of deficiencies or whatever it is. And then often if they want to renegotiate, they're going to have to renegotiate on a number that's higher than $2,000. That being said, if there's a couple of loose door handles and the buyer wants them fixed and the seller's happy to do it, renegotiations can happen. One thing I will let you know is if you do try and renegotiate on an inspection, and specifically if you try and renegotiate on that inspection in writing, the seller has the right to walk away. So you could actually be just trying to grind, and you could give the seller an out to go get a better offer somewhere else. So you may want to think twice before you consider, depending on the type of market you're in, renegotiation after inspection. Generally speaking, I tell my clients, we're looking for big things here, right? And an inspection report is, mold in the attic, roof needs done, furnace isn't working. It's not like, toilet seats are loose and stuff like that. So, but that's usually what buyers actually ask for, is really piddly, silly things just to make them feel comfortable with the transaction moving forward. This condition is for the sole benefit of the buyer. And of course, the seller, on reasonable notice, will allow access to the property for the inspection. So that's number two, financing inspection. Now, those are the hard ones. Even in a pretty fast market, you're probably going to still see both of those conditions in. So I'm going to say those are the top two most important. There are other terms, again, in Famous Five, starting with the property disclosure statement. Now, a property disclosure statement is a form filled out by the seller. Often sellers try and get out of giving any sort of disclosure. If it's owner occupied, you're going to get a disclosure. If it's a tenanted property, you're probably not. But you're going to see this condition often, subject to the buyer obtaining and being satisfied with, on or before, again, such and such a date, probably the same date as the contract up top, or the condition up top, the same dates, with a property disclosure statement with respect to the property. Now, personally, I don't necessarily like the way this one is written. I did cut and paste this out of the standard clauses. I prefer to actually identify the date of which the property disclosure was written, and usually it's done before the property comes to market. So I would love to see something inserted there that says, with respect to the property disclosure statement dated such and such by the seller. So you're actually going to have two different dates, but one is the date that the paperwork is signed. The other one is the condition removal date. In this case, July 24, 2024. The condition is for the sole benefit of the buyer again. Now, this is the interesting part, and this is actually where most lawsuits will come out of, is that with this new line here says, if the condition is satisfied or waived, the property disclosure statement will be incorporated into and form part of this contract. Now, that's to protect the buyer in order to make sure, hey, whatever statements you made on that property disclosure statement, me, the buyer, is going to hold you, the seller, accountable to it. And that's absolutely the way it should be, because it will now form part of the contract. If there's going to be a lawsuit, it's likely going to be over the seller lying, or maybe not knowingly filling out the property disclosure statement wrong. So most often, if the market is hot, or in any market actually, if the buyer's agent is doing the right amount of due diligence in advance, I don't even like to use this as a condition. It is very common that back in the day, this form wouldn't be filled out until after your accepted offer. But now it's usually filled out when the listing documents are filled out, and we should be able to satisfy this. I mean, it's a 4 or 5 page document, so you should be able to read it and be happy, or ask questions about it before actually writing your offer. And another fun fact in real estate, disclosures should always be made prior to writing an offer. So they actually should be provided with that document earlier than later. They shouldn't be after the condition. But it came out of a lazy man's market where we just reviewed those documents after the fact. Next up, insurance. Subject to the buyer, again, these are all buyer conditions, obtaining approval on or before, again, that date, whatever that subject removal date is, from a licensed insurer for the property, including fire, liability insurance. So this is subject to you, the buyer, being able to secure home insurance. A lot of buyers don't even bother doing this. It drives me crazy. I always get a call one day before completion. Hey, what's going on? What's the wiring? What's the plumbing? How old's the roof? How old's the hot water tank? Do that before your financing's in order. If you need help, we have insurance brokers we can recommend you to. You should find out if the property can be insured. Now, most properties can be insured, but what is the cost to insure that property is the next question. So if you have aluminum wiring, if you have poly B piping, if your roof is too old, if your furnace is too old, your cost of insurance can actually go up, and that may actually change your position to purchase a property. So if you have added costs, you want to make sure the property can be insured. Also, sometimes here in Surrey anyway, if the home is too old, it can no longer be insured. The actual structure can't be insured. Maybe you can get liability, but can't insure the structure. Or maybe you're in floodplain. We had flooding here in Abbotsford a while back, and insurance in those places, wildfires. So you want to make sure the property that you're purchasing can be insured. And that is a little different than necessarily strata insurance, which we're going to get to here shortly. But put in a condition to insurance. It's really easy to get a quote on insurance. I mean, you reach out to a broker, you give them the details of the property, and they should be able to say, hey, that's going to be $1,200 a year, $1,500 a year, $2,500 a year, whatever it is, right? You just want to be happy with that number in advance. Next up, title. Now, title isn't that much dissimilar to me to property disclosure statement. I should be able to receive it in advance, and I should be able to review it. If the title is blank and there is no charges against the title, then hey, I can probably just remove that condition and just incorporate the title again into the contract. But often there will be certain things registered on title. Maybe there's a lawsuit, maybe the owner's getting sued, maybe there's an easement that I want to look into. So we insert subject to the buyer being satisfied with, on or before, again, that whatever magical date that is, with the title, encumbrances and legal notations affecting or benefiting the property. This condition, again, is for the sole benefit of the buyer. Then you have the chance to review the title. But there was a catch. So there's a difference between a financial charge like a mortgage and then a non-financial charge like an easement. Well, in section 9 of the contract, which it references here, the seller actually says they will deliver title free and clear of all encumbrances. So at one point, there was a buyer that wanted to get out of a contract, and there happened to be like an easement or a right-of-way or something on the property, and they went to close, and they said, no, remove that charge from the title. And of course, you can't remove that charge. Maybe it's a hydro easement or something like that. Of course, you can't remove it. And the buyer said, well, it says right there, I get my title free and clear of any encumbrances. So this was then added, this clause here. On the completion date, in addition to the encumbrances set out in section 9 of the contract, title to the property will be subject to encumbrances and legal notations especially indicated to remain on title as shown in the title search that is attached to the contract. So in other words, if there are these other little details that we told you about, they're going to stay, right? Non-financial charges. Mortgages aren't going to transfer over, but non-financial charges such as easements, right-of-ways, they do stay with the property. And if that section of the title clause is not inserted there, you as the seller could actually be in a really negative spot on closing. So make sure that this section is inserted into any offer that you are receiving, specifically if you have legal notations or things like non-financial charges on your title. Now, those were the famous 5. I'll go over them here again real quick. Financing, inspection, property disclosure statement, insurance, and title. However, if you're buying a strata properties come with a bunch of strata documentation because now you're buying into the common property, condo association, whatever you want to call it. So you do have to know that there is more that comes with that. So if you're buying a detached property, you can end the video now. Probably doesn't concern you from this point forward. But if you're buying a condo or a townhouse, this is the part you want to pay attention to. Subject to the buyer, again, they all start off the same way, subject to the buyer receiving or being satisfied with on or before such and such a date, the following documents. These may not be all of the documents, but these are probably the most important documents for a strata. Number 1 is called the Form B. This is a particular document to the exact unit itself. It tells you all about the unit, and it also tells you up-to-date information on the contingency reserve fund. If the owner owes anything to the strata, like it tells you all of the important information, parking stalls, locker numbers, and how they're registered. So Form B is probably the number 1 most important strata document that you can get, and you want to review it for every single strata purchase possible. You also want to take a look at the registered strata plan. One thing we're noticing lately is registered strata plans at the BC land titles are listed as larger than the actual square footages of the unit when we get them measured. And again, a lot of agents are lazy. They go off of the registered strata plan, and the actual square footage is smaller. They don't even bother measuring. So you do want to check your actual square footages with the actual registered strata plan to make sure you're indeed buying the right size unit for what you're paying for. You're going to review all of the current bylaws and financial statements, which is very important. There is bylaws that will affect how you can use the property. You want to make sure you're okay with them before you proceed. The meeting minutes, this is probably one of the biggest ones. Meeting minutes, particularly the AGMs and the SGMs. We want to make sure that we're reviewing what has been passed, what has been talked about, what repairs could be coming up. That's all going to happen within the minutes. There's going to be a bunch of stuff in the minutes too about, noise complaints and whatever. I wouldn't focus so much on that stuff unless it's maybe to do with your particular unit. Current insurance coverage, of course, super important. And we're actually going to get to this later on. The hardest part about buying a strata property right now is actually insurance, specifically if you're in a concrete high rise in an area like Wally. Insurance is super, super, super important. So you're going to want to review the insurance policies of the strata. So the way a strata works is you have your own insurance that covers your liability and your stuff inside, but the building itself, the structure is insured by the strata. It's within your strata fee. So you're going to want to find out what's in there and what's included. And I'm going to get onto that in a sec because there never used to be this next clause that's coming up, but we've had to insert it because there's so many insurance issues now. And then there's all sorts of other information and other types of documents that you would want to probably insert here if you're an agent. So there's depreciation reports. There's all sorts of stuff that you could be asking for. So the one that I actually use rather than the standard form, it indicates a lot more things. Particularly depreciation reports are getting better. I think they were a scam in the beginning, but they're getting better, and they are helpful to understand what to expect in the future of the complex. Then you want to make sure, this is immediately upon acceptance of this offer or counteroffer, the seller hereby authorizes the seller buyer agent to request all the documents at the, and then you have to say buyer's or seller's expense. This hasn't been updated yet, but now we actually have to prove when we list a property that we've already ordered the strata docs. So you should get those strata docs immediately after acceptance of an offer. But there is timelines for this, and it could be a week or 2 weeks later. So you have to make sure you understand when you're getting them. One thing I want you to watch for here as a seller is a lot of agents say, if you don't deliver all of the documents to me by this day, our subject removal, all those dates that are further up in the contract, they automatically get moved to 3 days after we receive all the documents. Well, that's really wishy-washy. I don't like that. And then they could say, oh, that 1 month of minutes you didn't get it to me, or I missed the email. Now we have an automatic subject removal extension. Really, really not a big fan of that. So make sure there's nothing in here that says the dates of the subject removal automatically extend. And then this condition is for the sole benefit of the buyer. Now, here is the big one lately. Anyway, strata insurance has become a massive issue here in BC. So as a result, all of our strata properties should have a clause similar to this. Subject to the buyer reviewing and approving the terms and rates of the strata corporation's insurance, deductible amounts, which is the biggest part. I'll cover that in a sec. And coverage limits. Then the buyer confirming the buyer's ability to obtain personal strata owner insurance, being satisfied with those terms. So and then again, of course, you're going to insert a date. What does this all mean? Well, stratas a little while back have had this issue where they have a deductible for things like water loss. If there's a flood on the top floor of a building, it floods every unit down, all 400 units below it. The strata's insurance will likely take that over. But if it was your fault, you're going to get charged back their deductible. Their deductible could be $100,000. So you now have to make sure you can get insurance that'll pay that $100,000 for maybe a smaller fee, like $1,000. But the issue that we've had is some of those strata deductibles are north of between $100,000 and $250,000. It's really expensive. And north of $250,000 strata deductibles, you're likely not now getting insurance for it. So it's very important that your personal homeowner insurance can cover the strata's deductible insurance. And that's why this insurance clause is so important, particularly maybe not so much in something like a townhouse. But I would say if you're writing on a strata property, you want to make sure this is there. And I've got a pretty good handle on where your fees will be. For instance, if it's under $100,000, you're probably still $600-700 a year currently. But if you're up at $250,000, it can be $2,000 or $2,500 a year to insure your unit, which is a lot more than you were expecting. So you want to make sure that you can get insurance that will cover your strata deductible amounts. That's the one big takeaway I want you to have. And then, of course, we want copies of all those documents. So you have to request that in writing to make sure you get them. So there you go. Those are your main conditions that you're going to want to insert in most contracts, including the last two specifically for strata. I think if your agent's doing a good job and you're trying to make a good offer from a buyer's point of view, you probably only want financing, inspection, maybe insurance on a detached property. Those PDS and title, hopefully you can do your due diligence in advance, make your offer a little stronger. But then, of course, you want to review all of those strata documents. And that last one, that strata insurance, is so big. So many people are getting into bad strata insurance situations. They don't understand why. And well, this can help protect you right here. And it will take some work on your end. This is not all for your agent to do. You, as the buyer, are required and responsible to actually go ahead and make sure you do all of your due diligence on these topics. Your agent is there to guide you through that topic, but you're the one making the purchase, and you have to decide if you're comfortable with the building and the exact situation you're in. So hopefully this was helpful. But if you're still confused and you are looking to purchase a property or sell a property here in my market of Surrey or the Fraser Valley of British Columbia, and you need help, well, you can book a call with me right now using the link in the description below at a time that works best for you. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe, click the like button, and we'll see you in a couple of days.